When it comes to financial education and literacy, it is up to you to really take charge of your education. And in today's video, we're going to be sharing our works compilation for this entire week, which includes building that $1 million IRA, building wealth with just $1,000. So starting off small, getting comfortable for retirement, and knowing financial secrets. So I hope you enjoy the content. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Subscribe to the channel if you like it, and thank you for watching. Starting with just $1,000 and a solid plan can start you on the right foot in the path to financial growth. In today's video, we're going to be looking at 10 actionable plans to build wealth starting with just $1,000. So it's very simple, very easy to get into. But with smart investment, with disciplined strategies, you can grow that into a fortune step by step, leading to big results. So let's go ahead and get into this one. Now, the first one we look at is investing into index funds for long-term growth. When we start looking at ETFs, when we start looking at something like the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, it makes a big difference when you're starting putting money in there because you automatically have a diversified portfolio when you are tracking indexes themselves. When we start thinking of the S&P 500 or the VOO, which is the Vanguard version that tracks that S&P, average returns around 10%. So if you think about it, in the course of a year, you could turn that $1,000 that you have into $1,100, and then it starts snowballing. That is where the interesting part is, because then in year two, you have that $1,100 and it starts snowballing, even building faster and faster. Over time, you can end up with a giant snowball just with that $1,000 that you put in there. Now, of course, if you don't have an emergency fund, this could be the money you're using to start the high yield savings account. Most of them are offering right now about 4%. Now, the big thing with the high yield savings account, or even putting the money in the CD, it is secured. It is usually FDIC or NCUA insured. And of course, it means you're getting a guaranteed return. The return might be a little bit lower than what we see for the stock market, but overall, you are starting and getting a return, which is the same when we look at number 3, purchasing dividend stocks. These are passive income. Consider dividend stocks. You put your money in there. It is a stream of passive income that they are going to pay you on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, whatever it does. When you look at Johnson & Johnson, when you look at Coca-Cola, when you put at some of these companies that have given dividends for decades, really at this point, besides dividend income or besides the income you get there, you can reinvest the dividends. Now, this, of course, is going to grow that snowball. So if you think of a stock increasing not only in the value, but you're also yielding dividends from that, it can really make that snowball build a lot faster. Now, the fourth one we look at, launching a low-cost business. Now, when you think of a low-cost business, something like YouTube comes to mind, but looking at selling crafts, freelance services, teaching tech skills online, just grabbing a camera, getting a phone. With $1,000, you could get basic tools, you could get marketing, you could get a setup. And of course, when you start looking at a business, this could be the slingshot to getting you to where you want to be. Me personally, I've always dreamed about financial education, and doing it on YouTube is a perfect platform for me. So if you like the content that I'm putting out, definitely subscribe to the channel. Let me know below what you think, and let's continue with this list. Now, the next one, investing in peer-to-peer lending for steady returns. This, of course, is Lending Club. There's a lot of other companies that are micro lenders. So what they do is they pool a bunch of money together. They take that money, they lend it out on personal loans, they lend it out on small business loans. They give you an annual return of about 5 to 10%. So very close to the S&P 500, but you have to remember, when it comes to peer-to-peer lending, there can also be a little bit more risk depending on how risk adverse you are. Little riskier, but of course, when you look at a multitude of loans where if you're taking that $1,000, you're doing 10 loans grouped with a bunch of other people, chances are not all 10 loans of those are really going to go bad. If that was the case, Lending Club would probably be out of business, but it does offer you a pretty good return. Now, another one that we see, and I see this like crazy, and I want to talk about it for a minute, flipping undervalued items on online marketplaces. So when we think of flippers, when we think of the garage sailors you see on YouTube, you see on TikTok, when you see, the people that are reselling shoes, when you look at Pokemon and Magic the Gathering cards, there are so many different things that you can purchase and set them up on a platform, looking at eBay, thinking of Facebook Marketplace, simplifying and allowing bulk purchases and making money this way. There's a lot of people, crazy enough, that I've seen trade Pokemon cards that are putting themselves through college. That's right. Flipping and buying and selling Pokemon cards is paying for a formal education, which is kind of crazy. Now, when we start thinking about skills, acquiring a marketable skill through online courses. Now, if you want to talk about Warren Buffett talking about an investing, the best investment is always in yourself. using that $1,000 to enroll into online courses. If you look at data analytics, design, coding, Udemy, Coursera, there are a lot of courses out there that you can get that can enhance your skills, giving you not only the ability to be a lot more profitable, but it could also be growing in your field depending on what you work in and what kind of degrees. Now, when we think about contributions and when we think about doubling contributions, we have to talk about IRAs, contributions to the Roth IRA for future wealth. Now, this, of course, if you're putting money into a Roth IRA, this is tax-free growth. And then during retirement, it is going to be tax-free withdrawals. This is the time to start building out that nest egg and really understanding exactly how much and how magically the compounding interest does work. Very low risk. You have to make sure, though, when it comes to IRA money, that it is invested in the place. I stress this a lot. Don't leave your IRA money at financial institutions. Make sure it's invested in the stock market, the S&P, whatever it may be, that it is invested in its entirety. And the final one we're looking at is fractional real estate opportunities. This brings up Fundrise. Now, Fundrise actually just had something, I believe it was North Myrtle Beach, that they were guaranteeing a 16% return on there, which is kind of crazy. So if you don't have the ability to buy property outright, looking at some REITs, looking at platforms like Fundrise, you can invest as small as $10 in here, which of course is really big in the rental income market and the appreciation of the homes themselves. They do pay you, and I believe it's quarterly at this point when it comes to the dividend, depending what you're really built into. So you could take that $1,000, you could really break into a portfolio where you're investing in real estate, which is pretty cool. And the final one here is starting a personal investment fund for an ETF. Now, exchange traded funds are my absolute bread and butter. I love it. Looking at different sectors, looking at industries, even thinking of the index investing, ETFs make it accessible and it is at a fractional share. When you think of like spider funds, the SPDR or Vanguard ETFs, they carry a variety of risks, so make sure you do your own research before you get invested in those. So, all right, guys, so that is going to do it for 10 actionable item plans to build wealth starting with just $1,000. So it is very basic, it is very baseline, but let me know in the comments what you guys think, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Do the wealthy truly know something that we don't? In today's video, we're going to be looking at financial lessons that only the wealthy truly understand. And I want to break these down. So when it comes to financial education and literacy, it is something that I feel really needs to be taught in school. When you're thinking middle school, when you're thinking high school, learning how to invest, entrepreneurship, even looking at personal finance needs to be the educational basis. And overall, some of these concepts are foreign to a lot of individuals and they don't hear them. So let's go ahead and kick off this list. Now, the first one, investing is essential. It is not optional. This is one of the biggest things. The earlier that you really grasp this concept, that when it comes to being wealthy, it is not enough to just save money. If you're just saving money, it's going to get eaten up by inflation. You're not going to have the nest egg that you need. That means consistently and constantly investing into stocks, real estate, business generating passive income, anything that is going to offer that compound growth. And again, the earlier that you get this, time is the secret weapon. When you think about timing the market versus time in the market, the time in the market is always going to win 99.9% of the time. And even thinking of 401ks, thinking of IRAs, thinking of wealth generation, over 90% of millionaires are first generation millionaires that are made from the stock market itself. Now, the second one, money is a tool, not a goal. This is something that it took me an incredible amount of time to actually get over. When you think of money, it is something that is not only building wealth, but it is something that you exchange for goods and services. It is really the tool to achieve the goals that I want. When you think about money and you think about, I want to make $100,000, I want $1 million, I want $5 million, it doesn't matter. It is not the ultimate objective. It is not getting the wealth that is there. It is about investing, growing a business, career opportunity. The life you want to have is more of a means to an end, because unfortunately, when we all go, and of course, we always do have an anointed date, but overall, when you do go, it's really about making the most of the time that you're here, because you can't take the money with you. If you're setting up generational wealth, if you're thinking your kids or your grandkids, it is the accumulation and really purposeful planning and financial planning that is going to really make the big difference. Now, of course, for me, this is something, again, Took a little bit later in life to really understand multiple streams of income. Now, this is really the key to generating wealth and diversification and really investing. People don't understand that if you're really relying on that single source of income, so you have a 9 to 5 job, if that goes away, that's it. It's wrecked, it's ruined. All of your wealth, all of your income generation is completely gone. Now, for this, we look at rental properties, dividends, side businesses like what we're doing right here on YouTube, royalties to include financial stability. So for instance, if anything should happen to my job, God forbid, then I would have the access to put more time and effort into YouTube. And honestly, looking at that, it could be a supplement until I go back to work, until I find something else. But looking at a lot of different places, you could really have multiple streams of income. When you think about dividend income, when you think about your side hustle or whatever it may be, when you look at interest income, you can be on the opposite side of the fence. Now, what I mean by that is one side of the fence is you're paying for your mortgage, you're paying for your auto loan, your student loans, your credit card debt, everything in your life, really, you're paying interest. You are paying to finance everything that you have on in your life. The other side of the fence is people are paying you for the assets that you control. And of course, if that is stocks in a portfolio, they're paying dividends. There's usually a dividend yield. You see a growth. If you have money in the bank, they're paying you interest in CDs or savings accounts. There is a way to really bridge this gap, and it comes with a lot of financial planning and dedication. Now, before we get into the next one, guys, please subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and let's get into this. The number 4 we look at, budgeting isn't just for the poor or the uneducated. Now, when it comes to budgeting, contrary to popular belief, a lot of people that are very meticulous about budgets, that are very wealthy, know exactly where their money is, what the money is going for, what expenses they are paying. They know every dollar. We've kind of beat this drum a lot when it comes to Dave Ramsey. When it comes to budgeting, people that I have seen personally in my life, I do financial education, I do budgeting, I do financial counseling. People that I see that have built out budgets and know exactly where their budget is are exponentially greater off when it comes to money management, when it comes to, avoiding unnecessary expenses, or when it even comes to prioritizing the goals in their life. Budgets are key, not just to know exactly where it is, but to know your financial well-being in general. Now, debt can be used and really built as a wealth building tool. Now, this one, a little bit of a double-edged sword. Wealthy people distinguish between good debt and bad debt. These are two different ways to really do this. Now, when you start thinking of bad debt, now you can break it into these two categories. When we start thinking of bad debt, that is anything, in my opinion, that is not tied to an asset. When you think of your mortgage, it's tied to your house, it is tied to an asset. When you think of your auto loan, you think of your car, it is tied to an asset. When you think of credit card debt, there is nothing it's tied to, just your promise to pay. Same with unsecured loans, same with a couple other loans. Not only do they have a much higher interest rate, which makes it bad debt, but there's nothing and no asset attached to it, which in my opinion makes a big difference. Now, thinking of good debt, and honestly, some of the good debt kind of goes back and forth. But again, when you think of a mortgage, most people need a place to live. A lot of times renting can feel like throwing away money. Depending on your situation, renting might make sense for you. But also when it comes to good debt is student loans. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say student loans can be classified as bad debt. When you think of the ability to utilize student loans, if you don't have the money to pay for an education, to advance your career, to get an advanced degree, to go into essentially a higher paying job for the rest of your life, there's going to be a point when your student loans are paid off in full. That good debt allowed you to earn the income. And I'm speaking from personal experience. Me going to school, getting a bachelor's, getting a master's degree in finance made a big difference with good debt. Even though I had to take out student loans, it allowed me to get a much higher paying job because I did have an advanced degree in finance. And leveraging good debt really can grow your net worth. And that's exactly what it did when I was building out my net worth. Now, the next one we look at is paying themselves first. This is another one that I had to start. And I started when I was about probably mid-20s, paying myself first. So when you think of your paycheck, and regardless of how much you get paid, putting away 10% into savings and investing before you're really going and using anything else. So if you think about a budget and thinking about my zero-based budgeting is right off the bat, if I'm taking 10%, it's going to my savings emergency fund. Once it's fully funded, that 10% goes into essentially my 401k, my IRA, whatever investment vehicle that you choose. That means I have 90% of my income to live on. Now, on that 90%, I'm going to pay all my fixed expenses, my variable expenses, And whatever I have left over is what I'm going to use for fun, or I'm going to use for bulking up that investment account. It is a really common strategy. What happens for a lot of people is they utilize 100% of their income. 50% goes to fixed expenses. We have another 30 or 40 to the discretionary or those variable expenses. That last percent is used a little bit for kind of debt repayment. And then we end up not saving anything, and we don't end up investing anything at all, which of course can be super detrimental. Now, when it starts to YouTube, when it comes to time management, time is their most valuable asset. This is something, again, it took a little while to really relax and see wealthy people, time is more wealthy and worth more than it is money. If I think about my hourly wage and how much I make, when I look at simplified tasks, even thinking of editing YouTube videos, what does that make sense? Could I pay someone to do the job a lot better, a lot cleaner, a lot faster at a much cheaper cost essentially than it would cost me to do it myself? If I'm spending 5, 10, 15 hours editing a single YouTube video, does it make sense to just hire someone who can do it in 2 and pay them and be done with it? Now, as we continue to grow the wealth and as we're continuing to build these portfolios, high impact activities really grow the wealth. If I can make more YouTube videos while I have somebody else editing, because I'm not putting all of that time into editing, you can go ahead and generate more income. And of course, most of the YouTubers, when you think about getting larger, they have teams that are supporting them. They have editors, they have content creators. They are just the face of the YouTube channel itself. And overall, everything behind the scenes is created and completed by another person. The next one we look at is embracing calculated risk. Now, this one, I love stepping outside of your comfort zone. Wealthy people understand the importance of taking risk, whether it's a little bit of risk like starting a business, investing in a new market, going for innovative ideas, even investing in Bitcoin, getting into cryptocurrency, getting into a couple different spaces. You don't have to do this. The potential reward is a lot higher for the risk that you're putting in there and making informed and educated decisions. Now, we talk about this a lot. When it comes to decision making, you have to make sure you know exactly what you're investing in. So if you don't understand blockchain technology, if you don't understand cryptocurrency, do not invest in it, guys. You have to know exactly where you're putting your money, why you're putting your money in it, and exactly what the risk is. Now, of course, for me, I take small calculated risk where a majority of my portfolio, roughly 95%, is in ETFs. It's in the market itself. It's invested in some tech. We do have some income generation. We also have some foundational ETFs. And I have that very small percent, which is my 5%, into Bitcoin itself. And I only buy Bitcoin. I do have a crypto portfolio. Outside that is altcoins, a bunch of other things because I do a lot of gaming. And of course, there are a lot of crypto NFT games out there that I like to. But again, I understand the technology and use it and leverage it to its fully. Now, next one we look at, don't follow trends blindly. This is one thing that can get you into serious, serious trouble. When it comes to financial fads, wealthy people are super cautious about trends, super cautious about the news, social media. There are so many things on there where even, content creators have been getting burned by promoting cryptocurrency, by promoting a lot of different products and services, where essentially the hype is building up and really, really trying to create value where there is no value between a lot of things, and they have gotten burned. Really avoid the hype, guys. It is something where if you see something like, for instance, today, we've seen a big dip in the quantum computing when the CEO of NVIDIA said it might be like 10 or 15 years away, might be a little over exaggerated. But again, there was a big pullback just for the simple fact that a CEO of a company spoke. Could be completely wrong, might be spot on, nobody knows. But in turn, quantum computing did pull back a little bit today. Now, number 10, networking is a financial skill. When you have and recognize the power of connections with other individuals, it is going to change your life. When you have like-minded people, when you have mentors, when you have professionals, when you have YouTube groups, when you have a lot of collaboration, networking is not just about the social aspect of getting together, but really leveraging the financial opportunities that are there. And of course, the last one I'm going to leave you with, generosity is part of the strategy. When you think of creating wealth and when you think of really the wealth generation, very intentional about giving back to the communities, giving back to people, supporting local businesses, helping other people through mentoring programs. There are so many things where even if you don't have the money, goodwill opportunities, making a positive legacy and an impact on your community is an absolute game changer when it comes to how you feel about you being honestly a good human being, if you take a couple minutes in the morning, give some gratitude, make sure the generosity is there throughout the day, you will have a much better life. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Do you have $1 million in a Roth IRA? If you don't, then today is the video for you. We're going to be talking about how to build $1 million Roth when you start investing in 2025 and exactly how you can do this and what kind of time frame it's going to look like. So as we start the new year, 2025, you can start it off on the right foot. You can start investing, you can start saving, you can start putting money into Roth IRAs. Now, the reason why we talk about this, when it comes to a Roth 401k, when it comes to a Roth IRA, Roth money is after tax contributions, which means if you have an extended runway, let's say 20, 30, 40 years to let this money grow, you can turn it into a multi-million-dollar portfolio with the contributions that you normally put in there because of the compounding aspect. Now, when you do get to that $1 million plus portfolio in a Roth IRA, it is after tax dollars. You do not owe any money on that money at all. You don't owe money on the growth. After you reach that 59 and a half, you can take money out of the IRA as long as you meet the 5-year rule, completely tax-free. Now, why is this my favorite form of retirement and the one that I put my most money into? It's because when you start thinking of retirement savings, if you're in a lower tax bracket or if you want to be in a lower tax bracket later on, after tax dollars make sense. And there's no way when you start thinking about trying to forecast exactly what tax brackets are going to look like when you get ready for retirement, it's going to be crazy. I feel like when we get to retirement, taxes probably are going to be a little bit higher. Things are going to be a little bit more expensive. And there are some caveats that we really need to go down there. So let's break this down. Now, first of all, creating a Roth IRA. Now, contribution plan, this is where you're going to do it. And if you're eligible for a Roth IRA, make sure you do not exceed the income limits. But when you look at contributions, 2025 contribution limit is holding steady at $7,000 if you're under 50. If you're over 50, you can actually do a $1,000 catch-up contribution. So you can put up to $8,000 into this. Now, contributing to the max starting out might be a little bit much if you're not really on board, if you're not putting money aside. Totally understandable if you're not maxing this out. But what can you set as a realistic target in 2025 for you? Might be 1,000, 2, 5, whatever it may be to start off in building out this Roth account. Now, of course, breaking it down is when you start thinking about contributions, what do you want to put in there? When you start breaking down that $7,000 limit, you're looking at $583 a month, $135 a week. You can break it down into smaller, lot more manageable chunks. And again, if you start thinking, I can't do $135 a week, what can you do? Is it $100? If it's $75, $50, even $25, will make a big difference when you're aiming for and trying to achieve that maximum contribution every single year. And it comes with automation. Now, when it comes to reoccurring transfers, guys, similar to a 401k plan, you have to do it, really set it and forget it. When you start thinking about consciously putting money in there, it is really a smart move. And I have seen this so many times. If you set it automatically, it's like the money isn't even there. When it's coming from either payroll deductions or it's coming from a transfer from like a checking to your Roth IRA, you can set it and forget it for that amount. Don't have to worry about it. Don't have to do anything. As long as you set your investment vehicle, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that's all you have to do. Now, of course, you can accomplish this by trimming some unnecessary expenses. When you look at your debit card statement, your credit card statement, canceling unused subscriptions, maybe cutting back on some things that are non-essential spending to up the amount that either you're doing in debt repayment, which that is the first phase, but also making these contributions. Now, remember, with the Roth IRA, because there are contribution limits, you have to be investing regardless of where you are for the debt structure. When we start thinking of 401k matches, that would be the first place that I'd look. After you're there, I would probably look to something like the Roth IRA to start investing in if you're not putting money into a 401k or if your employer does not match anything you're putting in there. Now, of course, you could make use of windfalls. Now, every single year, stocking away a bonus, doing some overtime, you have tax refunds, anything you could really put a boost into that IRA account without putting a strain on your budget. And of course, when you think of something like side hustles, anytime you can make some extra income, whether it's from a gig, whether it's from YouTube, like what we're doing here. And of course, if you like the content that I'm putting out on financial education, definitely consider commenting below and subscribing to the channel because we have new videos every single day. But whether you're working that side hustle like YouTube, you're selling products and services, you could funnel that money directly into an account, which personally for me, everything that we make on this channel through the memberships, through the super chats, donations, even YouTube AdSense, I put into an account. It is a YouTube AdSense account that I do have with M1 Finance. I have a link down below if you want to sign up for M1 Finance, but everything we do put into a YouTube AdSense, and I'm putting it into the HD, which of course is the Charles Schwab high dividend yield. And we are producing money on YouTube from a side hustle, putting it into a investment account that is generating income. So it is going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy and turning those investments and that money into more money through regular contributions. Now, of course, turning your contributions into investments. This is the part where I feel like traditional Roth IRAs, this is where people get stuck. When you start thinking big picture, your money in your IRA accounts has to be invested. We are not talking about sitting in CDs at, banks and credit unions. We are talking about investing in the market. And I'm going to show you exactly why. When we start thinking about CD contributions, right now they're running about 4%. So if you have your Roth money sitting in there, you are earning 4%, which means you are just keeping up with inflation. For a lot of times, if the money has been sitting there, most people are not even earning 4%. Most of the Roth accounts are earning about a 0.5%, which is absolutely nothing. Guys, you are losing money by keeping your money in those financial institutions if they're not paying you a good annualized return. So thinking about taking that money that is in the Roth IRA, putting it into something like an account with M1 Finance that does have Roth IRAs available, making your regular contributions in there, and putting it into an S&P 500 index fund, which if you've seen any of my videos, I love ETFs, I love index funds, but putting it in there, we have an average annualized return about 10%. So when you think about the 4% that financial institutions are offering, you're looking about 2.5x putting it into an account like an S&P 500 index fund and making it a big difference. So if you're investing that $7,000 annually, starting this year, and let's say today is day one, you open up that Roth IRA, you're starting to make your contributions. In 20 years, if it's growing 8%, you're at $345,000. Now, when you think about the average in the United States, you're already almost double the average income or double the average retirement fund than we see for a majority of Americans. If it's growing at 10%, you're at 441K. If we have a stellar year like we have over the last decade, you're at $564,000. You are already at $500,000 within 20 years. So think about this, guys. If you're 25, you're now 40, 20 years later with the growth, let's just say average of the S&P, 10%, you're at 441K. You are 45 years old at almost $500,000 in investment account. That's a pretty good retirement, and you still have a long runway for retirement. When we start extending this out to 30 years, again, thinking about that 10% growth, you're at 1.2 million. So again, think back to the scenario, you're 25 years old, you're saving your $7,000 annually with a growth rate of 10% over 30 years, you're just north of 1.2, almost to $1.3 million in this account. If the growth is a little bit higher, even 12%, you're at $1.9 million, which again is kind of crazy. And also when we start thinking about $7,000 invested annually for 40 years, so if you're 25, now you're 65, you have been investing $7,000 every single year for 40 years. Even at a 10% growth rate, you're at $3.4 million in that account. If we look at a 12% growth rate, you are north of $6 million just through IRA contributions. So think about this, guys. When we start thinking of the contributions we're making and the money we're putting in there, $583 a month over the course of 40 years just turned into $3.4 million. When you think about, again, the average in the United States being around 180K when it comes to actually investment portfolios, which is kind of crazy. So definitely today is the day. Get started on your $1 million Roth IRA. Kids are starting to invest a lot earlier. We're seeing the average age to start investing around 19, but what happens is people don't have a lot of money at that point to start investing. But even doing small investments, even doing, again, 25 bucks a paycheck, 50 bucks a paycheck with the compounding interest over a multitude of years is going to absolutely be crazy when you start thinking about what you can do with this. And of course, depending on where you are in life, let's say you're 25, you don't want to do those S&P 500 index funds. You want to go into something a little bit more aggressive. You could look at growth stocks. You could look at a lot of other assets out there that might yield a little bit higher than 10%. And of course, that's going to slingshot your portfolio into a much faster, much higher growth rate as it continues to snowball. So even though if your Roth doesn't hit seven figures, guys, you can definitely get there and build that $1 million retirement plan, making contributions into 401ks, taxable brokerage accounts, and of course the Roth IRAs, which I do recommend having a variety of them for the simple fact when you get to retirement, you really have to determine what is going to be the best method essentially to take funds out of. You know you're going to be having Social Security, so that is going to be income. You don't want to take that much money or have that much money, in my opinion, in traditional IRA accounts, because again, you're going to have to start taking money out with RMDs. RMDs are going to come with a big tax payment that you're going to have to put back. And of course, your portfolio will be exponentially bigger because you've had that growth factor in there. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Do you feel anxious or confused when it comes to retirement? This is one of those pain point questions when you start thinking of a household. How much money do you have to set aside for retirement and to have financial security when you get into retirement? Now, according to Bipartisan Policy Center, over 50% of Americans lack the confidence or the ability to know exactly what they're going to do during retirement, or know exactly what the comfortability is going to be during that point. And the reason for that is there is no magic number. When it comes to retirement, when it comes to retirement planning, it is not an exact science. There are going to be a lot of factors that we're going to be talking about in this video. So make sure you stay tuned. And of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing, and let's get into this video. Now, when we start thinking about the individual savings rate, it is going to change. It is going to vary greatly when you look at person to person, kind of based on things like income, when you started saving. So if you're starting to save at 25 or 45, it is going to make a big difference. And also there are two questions that are kind of impossible to really gauge. Number one, when are you going to stop working? Are you going to retire at 55, 60, 65, 70? That is going to make a really big difference. And the second one is the other side of that. How long are you going to live? If we had the answer to both these questions, retirement planning would be incredibly easy. If you said, I'm going to stop working at 65, I'm going to live till I'm 90, I need money until I'm 90, boom, we can run the numbers, we can run the math, knowing exactly how much you need makes it easy. But unfortunately, we don't have them. So what is the general guideline? Now, when we start thinking about bigger picture, 15% is the right place to start. That, of course, is a good place. When you start thinking of retirement planning, when you start thinking of income, there's going to be a point where, you start your career, you're 20, you're 25, you are starting out your career, putting 15% at a very low income. Let's say, again, you start out making $20,000, $30,000 a year. 15% might seem like a pretty big chunk, but at that point, you're not going to be making as large of contributions because, of course, you're not making as much money. Now, as you start getting more well-versed in your career, your 40s, 50s, 60s, you'll have a greater income, hypothetically, if everything goes well. Putting away 15% is going to build that nest egg a lot faster. So what exactly does this look like? When we think about people who are considered lower earners, earning less than $50,000 a year can probably save a lot less, saving roughly 10% instead of the 15%, because when you start getting into, a lower tax bracket or even a lower earner, the chances are putting away 15% of your income, when you think of the cost of housing, the cost of food, all of the expenses, it can be incredibly difficult to sock away 15%, but 10% definitely viable, 5% at a very, very minimum. Now, this, of course, on the flip side of it, thinking of our high earners, people who are making over $200,000 a year, you're going to have to save roughly 20%. Now, the big disparity between this, so if you have an individual $50,000 a year, saving 10%, you have an individual making $200,000 a year, saving 20%, that is because of what exactly is the retirement going to look like and what do those expenses look like. Now, depending on where you are, there is a big disparity between Social Security and what exactly it's going to look like. If you are on the lower side of the tax bracket or a lower earner, retirement savings and Social Security is going to make up a big chunk of your retirement when you do get there. For a high earner, because Social Security does have a cap, the Social Security benefits are not going to have quite the impact because it might be the same pool of money, but you're used to a much larger pool. If you think of an individual that, let's say, is making $5 million a year, they're not even going to care about what they get monthly basis from Social Security. It won't even make a dent into what they have or what they really, the lifestyle that they're used to, earning at a very high level. Now, when you think about this, households also have to know roughly in kind of a basic idea how much they're saving towards retirement. What does it look like? Now, for me personally, a lot of people that I see going into retirement, the problem that I see is going into retirement with high expenses. So what I mean by this, so you hit 65, you're supposed to retire, you're all set, you leave your job, you still have a mortgage, you have car payments, you have credit card debt, you have unsecured loan, you have a bunch of debt going into retirement very, very quickly, going from a 9 to 5 job to a fixed income. If you're doing the combination of Social Security, if you have a pension plan, if you have an IRA, anything like that, what I have traditionally seen is people unfortunately just start taking massive amounts of money out of pension plans, or they start taking massive amount of money out of IRA plans. They start just liquidating a ton of it to eliminate the debt, to pay down the debt. Well, then all of a sudden their income gets reduced. Let's say you're used to making $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Now you're down to $2,800 a month with Social Security, which we know is taxed. Then you have Medicare or Medicaid, but you're not quite making that $2,800. So when you get to the point of, let's say, making $2,400, now your income is cut in half. Yes, your bills were reduced, but what happens essentially is the spending patterns have never changed. You are still used to a certain lifestyle. You still go out and spend. When we start looking at it in Social Security, even noted in this article, it's supposed to return about 50% of your income. And here they generally say having enough money to replace 70 to 75% of the salary that was earned, not including Social Security. So if you think about that and think about the numbers, so if you're making $100,000 a year, Social Security is giving you $35K. The disparity between that, you have to make up your other 65% or $65,000 out of an investment account if you're still staying at that $100,000 lifestyle. And of course, even when I look at my plan and my 401k, they estimate roughly needing 80% of the income. But again, it makes a big difference depending on how much debt you go into retirement. And of course, of that 45% or 45 percentage points come from savings. So about 45% of that being used in savings. And of course, the earlier that you start saving is the big thing. So they run through this scenario and I want to share this with you. So here's a basic example from Fidelity about how the calculator might work or what it might look like. So let's say a 25-year-old woman earns $54,000 a year, assuming a 1.5% range or raise each year. After inflation, she will be making $100,000 at age 67. Math there definitely works. Her savings would have to generate about $45,000 a year, adjusted for inflation, to keep the same lifestyle at 67. So again, bringing her rate back up to that 100,000, or it says this figure is 45% of her 100,000 income before retirement, which is adequate according to Fidelity for a personal savings rate. So think about that. So you're making $100,000 a year, you retire at 67, you're going to have to replace 45% of that income or $45,000 a year just to have the exact same lifestyle. Since she currently gets a 5% dollar for dollar match in the 401k, she would need to save 10% of her income, starting with $5,400 the first year, for a total of 15% towards retirement. So thinking about this again, you have an individual that is earning $54,000 a year to start, putting away 15% and putting away 15% from age 25 to 67 makes a big difference. However, 15% won't necessarily be the guidance or the accuracy of it, depending on what the investment is. So kind of crazy to think that you could put away 15% of your income. You could essentially do that for 40 years and still not have enough on a monthly basis or even an annual basis to cover the expenses that you're going to have towards retirement, which in my opinion is kind of crazy. So this, in summary, guys, they talk about some general guidelines for retirement and how much you need to save. So starting early, saving often is the main thing. So the more that you can afford and the more that you can put away essentially in retirement early, and doing this on a consistent basis will of course start the snowball, will start the compounding interest. If you can't save 15%, look at 10. If you can't save 10, look at 5. Even putting 1% away can start the habit of putting away and saving money, cutting costs and saving anywhere you can. Every time you get a raise, put a portion in there. So for instance, if you get a 3% raise, put 1% rate into that 401k, move it up a little bit, and then you still got a 2% raise. 1% went to the 401k, and trust me, the future will thank you. Now, number 4 that we talk about, most people invest too conservatively. Now, this is something that we've shared, and we've shared quite a bit. When it comes to the conservative nature of investments, when you start looking at a mix of stocks, bonds, everything else, it can grow adequate over decades, But when you get to retirement, a lot more goes into bonds, a lot more safer. And a lot of places are saying, looking at today's data, that is totally wrong. When it comes to investing and when it comes to retirement, you should stick in a 100% stock portfolio, looking at ETFs, looking at all of these growth. Target date funds are not optimal for everyone, but you still do need growth. So again, if you think of an individual that is retiring at 65, is going to live till 90, you still need to get growth for 25 years to maintain that lifestyle and making sure your portfolio is exceeding or really continuing to grow, which is kind of crazy, while taking full advantage of 401k plans, IRA plans, HSA accounts. A lot of those. We do not want the retirement funds that are going to be eroded by taxes in the future, which is kind of crazy. And of course, looking at some of the retirement, you have to be careful when it comes to pension plans. Even locally here, we have seen a lot of pension plans that have changed, that have moved to a 401k plan where some people are grandfathered in, new people are not in there. And also remember the final note on this one, the vesting rule. If you're with a company and they have a vesting period, most of them will be 2 or 3 years, meaning you are not entitled to any of those funds until that time frame does really lapse. So guys, when it comes to how much money do you need for retirement, it is going to be variable based on how much money you earn, what kind of lifestyle and what kind of really rich lifestyle you want to have during retirement. If you're looking at travel and also knowing how much and how big the expenses are when you go into retirement. All right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, and I'll catch you in the next video.